we're going to talk a little bit more about the art. We hope this is an opportunity as you're taking some time out of your day to kind of just take a little break for ourselves and reflect on why we do all the things that we do for the organizations and people that we love. So I'm going to get started here and share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint. This is really meant to be kind of workshop conversational, as Mandy mentioned. Mandy put together a really good kind of worksheet with a couple of prompts in it, just to kind of do a summary of some of the information that we're going to share today. And would love to have you all interact as much as possible. We've got a small enough group. Drop things in the chat as we're going, as things occur to you. I'm going to ask some questions. Maybe you can drop some things in the chat and answers, or just jump into the conversation. So we're excited to be here and talking with everyone today. This is the second in a 3-part webinar series about women in philanthropy. And really what we want to drive home today is all women have a legacy, and what that really looks like, and pointing you to some really, I think, helpful and inspiring resources, so that if you're interested in this, you can dive more into it on your own as well. You know, I like to talk about Prometheus, especially with the Greeks, those of us that have Greek affiliations. He was the original philanthropist. He was said to have had a human-loving character, human-loving way. And he gave humans two gifts: fire. So that was the technology, you know, to overcome and kind of, you know, symbolizing the knowledge and skills and all those things that, you know, humans are good at being very resourceful with. But he also gave us blind hope, or hope for a better future. And I can't think of a better time to be talking about hope in our world than now. I think it's been in my 20 plus years in working in this field of philanthropy. I've always enjoyed that, because I find the conversation to be very much about that hope for a future. And I think it's really interesting as we think about what we've been through for the past 2 years. I think a lot of people would maybe assume that philanthropy, fundraising, charitable giving may have gone down, but that's actually not the case. Charitable giving has gone up. From the Women's Philanthropy Institute at IUPUI, and I linked to this later in our presentation, they looked at giving from May 2020 to May 2021, and actually overall charitable giving increased. However, interestingly enough, single women and married partners, married couples, gave less than they did before, which is actually quite different than previous research. And so, you know, some of their findings were thinking, what are the broader socioeconomic reasons that maybe, you know, we saw a little bit of a flip in how that looks. For those of you that joined us last time, when we were talking about some of the research there, is that women often give twice as much as men in charitable gifts. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how we understand, meet our donors where they are, meet ourselves as philanthropists where we are, and understanding, you know, what that looks like in our environment right now. So a disclaimer, although I have a JD, I'm not giving legal advice or financial or tax advice. This is all just meant to be for your own edification and kind of general information purposes. Just want to make sure, because I'm going to talk about some charitable giving vehicles towards the end. But as you all know, hopefully, the Find Me Foundation is in the very last stages of its One Destiny campaign, which is a pretty amazing undertaking and has done some pretty impactful and awesome things. More to come on that. And I am in the great position to be campaign counsel currently for the foundation. So I'm very excited to be working with the foundation this way, and truly amazed by what you all set out to do and what you're going to accomplish in the next shortly 5.5 months, right? So one of the things we want to talk about as it relates to philanthropy is this idea. I love this idea of the power of the purse, right? We think of that in kind of, we think of Alexander Hamilton, The Power of the Purse, but I think here we're talking more of the power of women in philanthropy. And when I worked at Harvard University in plan giving, charitable gift planning, one of my mentors there was Charlie Collier, and he wrote a book called Wealth and Families. And it's right here. You can get it on eBay. And Charlie really started the conversation about how you talk to your children and your grandchildren and members of your family about all the different capital that you have in your family. He really took the family approach and said, it's not just your financial capital. It's all these other things that you have. You have social capital. From the research, especially what we looked at last time, the research around women specifically in philanthropy is there's change capital, women being able to foment change. And then there's the courage capital, and those being really big drivers in philanthropy. But I think the big idea there that kind of Charlie started the conversation, and then more research came in the women's philanthropy space, is that we have capital beyond just the financial. And so how do you use all those things to achieve what you want to happen in your life? And one of the books that we'll talk a lot about today, and I'll show you where to get it, is called Women, Wealth, and Giving. And I think the overarching idea that every woman has a legacy, and how we use our resources, our capital resources, to achieve those things we want to happen. And then one of the questions here is couched in that idea of happy endings. Like, how do we want things to resolve? What is our hope for the future? And how do we use our capital and our resources to make those things happen? So one of the kind of themes that really comes up a lot in women in philanthropy is this idea of values-based giving, and really taking stock of what I do in life, not just in what I would consider my philanthropic or charitable work, but what I do in life to live my passions. And some people call this time, talent, treasure. I like to use work, wisdom, wealth, because we're talking about women in philanthropy. But I think this is a good place to start as you're really thinking about, what is my own legacy? Not just philanthropic legacy, but what is my life legacy here? And like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about the art of this today, right? And how we look at, how that informs our values. I think in my experience talking about this topic, it seems so, obviously, right? But I think once we take a minute to be really intentional in thinking about how we use our time and our talents, we start to think, oh, well, maybe that's not really where I want to be directing that, or what am I getting, what is my bigger end goal with that? And I think this is it's some great questions, pretty simple questions, but really poignant questions at times. Mm-hmm. So the Women, Wealth, and Giving book talks about these 3 principles of abundance. They trademarked it, so it has a TM, and they say there's 3 ideas of abundance, right? Principles here, that every woman has a legacy. Every woman is a philanthropist, and every woman makes a difference. And I think this is important because I think so much we have these myths or barriers to understanding, what is a philanthropist and how we might define that. Like, if you were just to show images of philanthropists, probably 8 times out of 10, they might be male, right? We might not always think of them as female. Fun fact, Forbes just had an article the other day that Mackenzie, I'm blanking on her last name, Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, has now given away more in 2 years than he has in his lifetime, which I think is an interesting thing. I think, as we looked at last time, women are coming into their own wealth, their inherited wealth, or their earned wealth, and starting to make more of those household decisions or decisions on their own. And what the shape of a philanthropist, or what a philanthropist looks like, is changing. And so I think these ideas and the principles of abundance really apply, that every woman has a legacy. And I think a lot of women would say, no. They don't want the ego of that, right? There's like ego tied up in the idea of a legacy. And I think that's what this kind of scholarship is trying to kind of get at, is that no, everyone has a legacy and what that means. So let's talk a little bit about that. So this is why your story is important, right? The difference that you make in your community, how you want to be remembered, the joy you receive from giving, the gratitude of things that had impact in your life. And then this idea of like, if I had all the, millions or billions of dollars, what would I do to change the world? Right. And I think some of these things are really interesting to spend some time thinking about. And especially, I think, in our Greek space, being a Greek woman myself, that experience happens at such a pivotal time in your life, and understanding what that meant for you and the gratitude that you have and the position that it left for you is pretty, I think, important. And it's nice that FIMU can be part of that conversation. Now, that's not to mean that FIMU is the only charitable entity that, members support. By no means is that the case, but it's nice that they can be part of that launching pad, that understanding of that life well lived and what that story might look like. So this is I think, the idea of a story, writing your story. So one of the things that we were hoping that the worksheet that we'll get to will prompt for you is just kind of getting to some of these questions, like working through, what's that story? And I think we kind of gave a little bit of my story, the highlights, right? What are the things that I want, people to know about me? The unique talents and abilities, what projects, really are meaningful to me, where I give my energy, those things that I think really are things that we don't really take time to really stop and think about. And I think they can be really helpful from a global sense as we think about taking stock of these things and knowing where we want to direct our time, talent, treasure going forward. So the idea that every woman is a philanthropist is really important, because I think if it's too much tied up in just the money that people give, people say, well, no, that's not me, right? But we know that women give so much more than money. They give a lot of time and a lot of talent to the organizations they care about. And so I think it's really important when we think about philanthropists and we talk about philanthropists, that we talk about all the things that they give to the organizations that they care about. And it's not really about great wealth. It's more about that desire to leave the world better than you found it, right? I mean, I think that's what this is about, that idea of giving of yourself in so many different ways. And we know that that is a very female inclination by and large.
Very much so.
Yeah. And the idea of practicing philanthropy is interesting too, right? We're kind of practicing at this idea of being human loving, right? And how I live my values through that can be pretty impactful, I think. In fundraising space, we never want to be in that transactional place. We want to be more in that transformative. And when we find that those things can be aligned with people's values and what they want to see happen, it can truly be transformational, which is pretty awesome. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen when I've had these conversations with other groups is this idea of obligation in giving versus inspiration in giving, and really taking the opportunity to say, am I doing this out of obligation? Sometimes that is good. Giving out of obligation can be good, but are there things that I'm giving that I'm inspired to give to as well? And kind of reframing, maybe what your priorities are in giving that way. And then this last question, what do you want to do with your money that is meaningful to you? We put this on your worksheet as well. And feel free, as I'm going along, to take notes on that worksheet, write down things, type. We want this to kind of be an opportunity to kind of get your thoughts moving in this regard. So there's a company called Advancement Resources. They're out of Iowa, and they spent a lot of time and energy researching this to land on this question. They spoke to a lot of donors over the years, and they do a lot of development officer training in large research universities. And this is the question that they always talk to people about asking. What do you want to do with your money that is meaningful to you? To really understand, what is that driving meaning? What is that thing that is beyond, the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs and is more transformational, right? What is that thing that's going to kind of transcend what is meaningful to them? So I think when we think of it this way, then every woman is a philanthropist, right? And then how are we inspiring women to think in this way?
Mm.
Well, I had to put in a last slide deck. I had Aristotle in, and I know he's not a female, so I had to find some good examples of some philanthropists. And this is Mother Teresa. And I picked the bronze statue because when you think kind of like legacy of people, right? Seeing those statues and, kind of those monuments that we put out there. And I love this quote because this is about the difference. We ourselves feel that what we are doing is just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean will be less because of that missing drop, right? And I think we as women often sell ourselves short of what we're doing, right? We say, well, I'm not doing all that. I'm not this, I'm not that, but I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing that, right? And we forget that any contribution we're making has a significant ripple effect in our communities and the organizations that we love.
Kelly and I were talking about this quote, even as it pertains to One Destiny and our efforts with FIMU, because every dollar is counting for our One Destiny campaign. And so collectively, all of those drops are really going to move the needle and make an impact on our sisterhood and on our individual members, and how one less drop might not affect that member that needs it the most. And so this to me was so poignant for kind of where we're at with our One Destiny campaign and making that comprehensive campaign more powerful for our members.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to keep reminding ourselves of that.
Yeah, I agree. Together as FIMUs, we are so much more powerful to bring our resources together and make that change and relevancy in our future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the myths and barriers that sometimes come up with women in philanthropy. And I think that first one is, well, I don't have enough money to be a philanthropist. That sounds like a lofty term, right? You have to give $1 million to be a philanthropist or whatever. And I think, also we get into there's no way I can make a difference with my $25 gift. There's no way I can make a difference with my, $5 gift or whatever, but no, that all of that cumulatively makes a difference. And then I think, it's 2022, but I feel like there's still some of this kind of maybe overlapping assumption that, women's giving is influenced by their husband's giving, wealth, and interest. And maybe that is the case to some, but research actually says that often women are the ones helping to guide the philanthropic decisions in their families more and more. And then women give their time instead of money. And I know in our Greek women's groups, this is often the case, right? Because volunteering for our organizations take a lot of time and talent. And there's that, what does that look like? And I think just having that understanding of it's all of those pieces of what helps advance an organization and what it's really, kind of what it means. So I think just being mindful of some of these barriers or myths. Any other kind of barriers or myths that you all have heard as it relates to women in philanthropy and giving?
Or even maybe barriers that you have kind of self-perpetuated on your own, things that you have thought, oh, I can't do, or I'm not going to, because. Anybody want to share? It's okay if you don't. You can put it in the chat too.
You can drop it in the chat.
Or you can put it on your worksheet so that way it reminds you that is a barrier or myth that you have self-placed, rather than really empowering yourself to be the philanthropist that you are, and kind of owning that title amongst your many hats. Because I know that at least the women that I see around this table here are certainly philanthropists amongst many leadership roles that they host for our organization and for many others.
That's awesome. So I think, it's thinking about some of these things. And I think in our women's organizations like FIMU, it's important not only that we understand what we're doing, but how we're role modeling for others, right? Because that's really what we're doing. So, take a minute to think about like examples about how you are a philanthropist and, kind of like what Mandy said, some of those myths. And then, maybe who's a role model for your abundance and your philanthropy and how you approach those things. And then who are you a role model for? Are you working with chapter and there's collegiate, members that you're a role model for? Or maybe it's, members of your community, faith community, or a school community, whatever that looks like for you. How are you role modeling that behavior? Because I think that's important. I think we discount that a lot for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring to attention, I mean, even I don't want to call people out around the table, but I know of two of you around the table. Katrina just mentioned, her and her sisters got together. I told them, to endow a scholarship, it's $25,000, and you have to do it in 5 years. I think the three amazing leaders that I spoke to were like, oh, Mandy, we don't know if we'll get to that in 5 years. And not only did they get it to it in 5 years, they exceeded $25,000 to endow that scholarship, and they did it in less than a year. And they have literally brought together FIMUs from around the country in their fundraising efforts. And I hope, Liz, is it okay that I call you out too? Okay. And then Liz Dana's on the call, who I absolutely adore. And I can remember being on the phone with Liz, and she said, Mandy, I didn't know that I could be this powerful with my philanthropy, and the efforts that she has brought to the table. You are one of our top 20 donors, Liz. And so we are so excited for the thought that you all took this barrier that you thought was a huge mountain to climb, and you all crushed it. I mean, you literally shattered that glass ceiling that you had thought was in front of you regarding becoming a not only just a philanthropist, but a major gift donor that is going to make an impact immediately. So, I mean, honestly, two women around the table that have just done amazing things. And I can speak to a lot of others of you on this call too.
Yeah, that's amazing role modeling. And I think that's the beauty of campaigns like One Destiny, is that it shows other members what can be possible. And I think that's really exciting. And your leadership will, again, have those ripple effects that keep going, which is awesome.
Very much so.
So I think more things to consider. I think these are things that as you go throughout your week, we hope that you think about, like, oh, maybe that was something that I was thinking I couldn't do, or something I never really thought about, but it's something that I want to do more of. Volunteering, donating, whatever that looks like for you, I think can be important. Mm-hmm. Here's another great philanthropist, Eleanor Roosevelt. Mandy and I love Eleanor Roosevelt quotes, but I like this because I'm getting ready to talk about planning your giving plan. But since you get more joy, out of giving. I have R. I apologize. Out of giving to others, you should put a good deal of thought into the happiness that you're able to give. So I think this talks about having a plan with your philanthropy and what that looks like. So my firm is called Trek Advancement. I'm all about a journey, but I think, that's the idea, is how do you kind of create a giving plan to kind of think this through a little bit, to be intentional about your giving. And, I think one of the first things is really, what is that philosophy about giving? This is something maybe that you learn from your family. Like we looked at it the last time, that's where children most learn to be charitable, is at the kitchen table, right? Through their families talking to them or role modeling for them what it means to be giving. So just reflecting on what your giving philosophy. I know in my family, my parents have very specific things that they've always been passionate about and give to, food, shelter, clothing. Those have been my parents' passions, right? What's your giving philosophy? Do you have one for your family? You have one as a couple, an individual. What does that look like? And then how do you view your philanthropic actions? And it could be a mix of those things. Sometimes it could be entrepreneurial. There's a concept called venture philanthropy, where you're kind of trying to find different ways to solve an age-old problem, like funding different solutions. Is it social? Is there a social component to why you give and do the things that you do for philanthropic support? And then the question about values. And this is another kind of plan giving guru out there in the world. He likes this question: how would you like to advance your values through organizations you love and lead? And really thinking about that, right? Is that through a scholarship that, maybe has some, because you received a scholarship? Is that something that you valued in your education? Maybe it's through leadership. Maybe, that's really where you learned leadership skills that were able to take you through your life in service to your community. Maybe that's something that you're looking to support and value as you go forward.
Anybody want to share their
Yeah.
first moment that they felt a philanthropic impact, or where that was modeled in your life, or how you developed your giving philanthropic philosophy? It's okay if you don't. Okay, go ahead, Kelly.
No, that's great. Yeah. I think these are really, continuing conversations.
Agreed.
So there's a lot of resources out there to kind of, sorry, I'm moving you guys around my screen so I can see everything. But there's a lot of, partners out there that can help you in continuing to have these conversations. There are professional groups that discuss topics of charitable gift planning and philanthropy. There are professional advisors that you work with. Research shows us that majority of donors will talk to their CPA, their accountant, about charitable giving. Community foundations in your community often have seminars, opportunities to attend. And I've spoken to a lot of community foundations just about general giving structures and, motivations and things like that. So those can be great resources. Giving and donor circles where people contribute in aggregate and they give grants as a group. Women particularly really seem to pick up traction and really get kind of excited around giving circles. I know several universities have kind of modeled this as well, providing giving circles with specific impact grants on an annual basis. That can be a great way to kind of get resources and understanding what that looks like for you. I talked about venture philanthropy a little bit. This is kind of like having a capital, a venture capital kind of network, but really looking at it through the philanthropic nonprofit lens. If there's something in your community or across the country that you can plug into there. There are also independent philanthropic advisors out there that help families and individuals kind of plan what that kind of giving looks like. Mentoring and role models. And I think that's where in, a FIMU world that you can easily kind of plug into those mentor role model, mentee mentor kind of relationships in alumni networks and things like that. And then working through, your advisor networks and making sure the collegians have those tools as they go out into the world and start in their own personal and professional careers. And then your nonprofit development, officers like your Mandy Youngs of the world, right? That are there to kind of help you navigate not only for FIMU, but other organizations that you care about. So we really believe in donor-centered fundraising. And when you look at the principles of donor-centered fundraising, the first and foremost is to be a steward of philanthropy. And the more that you can help donors realize their different giving, priorities and how that can happen, the better for everyone in that regard. So nonprofit development officers can really be helpful in this regard as well. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of where you find value in this work. So I think of it, here, I love a Venn diagram, and, you find value here in this intersection. And you have your own passions and interests. We've taken stock, you've gone through the inventory, you've answered the worksheet, and you go, these are the things that I really care about, where I want to move the needle. I want to see, more women coming out of college with leadership training and being able to, be really competitive in the workforce, and, what that looks like. Maybe that's something you're passionate about. But so you find those organizations and causes, and you understand what their priorities are and what they're doing to make that happen. And then you also have these things, financial goals, right? You have things that you want to accomplish. So where you find value is where you meet your charitable goals with their financial goals there. And there are a lot of charitable giving solutions and opportunities to do that, where you find value there. So in charitable giving, there are three fundamental concepts from my perspective. You can just make gifts, give. That's, I think we're most familiar with that, write a check, put in your credit card, whatever that looks like, give. You can also give and receive income in return, and then you can give and protect. Now, some of these giving vehicles I'm going to talk about are not something that FIMU always can facilitate through the FIMU Foundation, but they can help you connect to resources that can do that. So we'll talk about some of those. Oh, I'm like clicking too quick.
You're good.
So in giving, we're talking about giving is not just deferred. When we talk about planned giving, a lot of people think that's one and the same, but planned giving is really anything other than just writing a check. But outright gifts, not just deferred gifts, can come in many flavors: appreciated securities, business interests, closely held stocks and partnerships, tangible personal property, real estate, and retirement plans, such as the qualified charitable distributions from an IRA rollover. These are all gifts. I've worked on every single type of gift that is in this list that people have utilized appreciated assets to make gifts to charitable organizations. And the reason why it's helpful in that financial, it marries that charitable goals with your financial goals, is there are tax incentives for utilizing these types of vehicles. So I think, we always think about, especially in the development world, do you have the affinity to give to the organization? And then what is your capacity to give? And I think a lot of what we want to talk about, the majority of what we really want to talk about tonight was, what is that affinity? What is your affinity individually? What is your personal legacy? How do you live that? How do you select the organizations that you support? And then once you know what those look like, what's your capacity to do so? And that's what we're talking about here, is how do you unlock assets that can further that organization or organizations or causes that you care about. And so for those organizations that are 501c3 organizations, these are tax beneficial ways of giving, which is great. If you have any questions as we're going through, please jump in. And I can't see everybody, so just jump on in if you want to ask a question. So the other type of giving is just gifts at death. And these what we would typically think of legacy gifts, because they're testamentary gifts that happened at the death of the decedent. So gifts from a will or trust, these are just bequests. People leave a percentage of their estate to organizations that they care about in their will or trust. And these can be pretty easy to execute. If you already have a will or trust, you can do this in the form of what's called a codicil to your will or trust to make a direct impact there. Life insurance gifts can also be designated to charitable organizations that you care about, as well as retirement plans. When we talked last time, we talked a little bit about how great retirement plans are to utilize as assets for your charitable giving, not only during your lifetime, if you're 70 and a half or older, but also at death, because they're highly taxed assets that are great to give to charitable organizations who benefit dollar for dollar and don't have to pay that tax that an individual heir would have to pay. So these are great gifts. The life insurance and the retirement plans are really simple gifts to make because they just require a change of beneficiary form often. Now, these are all called revocable gifts. That means they can be changed at any point in time until, the person dies, is no longer with us. So these are pretty simple. They don't have a financial impact right now, but they can have a tremendous impact, and they do have a tremendous impact for the future. The One Destiny campaign is recognizing individuals that have revocable gifts in their estate plans and celebrating those because they are so instrumental to continuing the mission of the foundation and to building that endowment for perpetual support of the foundation as well and its programs. So these are significant. And I think people don't realize the power of what they can do through these arrangements until they really stop and think about it and have the conversation conversation with people that can help them navigate these. So, I mean, a lot of these gifts are the gift that keeps on giving, especially when they're set aside in an endowment. And it's like endowing your annual support, right? You're continuing to support those organizations that you care about. Endowments are the gift that keeps on giving in perpetuity, right? So pretty powerful things that can have sustained impact over really, I mean, hundreds of years, which is pretty awesome. All right. The next is give and receive. And these are gifts where you make a gift and you get income back. They're pretty amazing. I've worked with donors many times on these and they say, how is this possible? And it's not only possible, but you get tax incentives for doing it. Now, currently, the foundation is not set up to administer charitable gift annuities. However, those are available through community foundations and other entities are interested in something like this. Mandy would be more than happy to get you information about how that works. There are different types of gift annuities. Also, charitable remainder trusts are very similar. They also pay income to the donor and the beneficiaries the donor designates. And those are really kind of great planning tools. Again, these are gifts made into an entity. Income comes out on a regular basis to beneficiaries. And at the end of the term, the death of the beneficiaries, the money then goes to the charitable organization. It's kind of like an endowment that pays the donor and then pays the charity. If you think about these. Another tool here, giving tool here is the pooled income funds. Not a lot of organizations do this, but it's a pooled fund similar to a gift annuity. Any questions about those? Because these can be really kind of unlocking assets. And I worked with a lot of women over the years that really appreciate the opportunity to make major gifts, but also receive income. Because let's face it, we live longer often than our male counterparts, and we want to ensure that we have the money that's going to be there to support us when we think we're going to have a long and fruitful life. And so I find that a lot of women want to think about these life income gifts as a way to incorporate in their overall philanthropic planning. When you do charitable remainder trust, you can designate more than one beneficiary, which can be fantastic if you've got a lot of charitable organizations. And then give and protect. These are some things that are a little bit more, not exotic, but you'll find these more maybe in a university setting. But charitable bargain sale is where there's a real estate transaction where you sell it below fair market value and get a charitable deduction for the difference. This can be a great tool for schools. I'm on the board of my children's private school, and we utilize this as a way to get a piece of property. If you have property that's next to a charitable organization, it might be something you might want to look into. Charitable lead trust is just kind of the opposite of what I was talking about before. It's where the trust pays the charities that you designate, and then on death, it passes to you or to your children or grandchildren. And this can be something that people might use instead of having a family foundation. Another thing that I really talk about, but is kind of similar to this, but kind of is more time limited. It doesn't have some of the tax benefits, but donor advised funds are really popular things right now. Fidelity, your community foundation has donor advised funds, and those end up being just a charitable checking account. And then finally, there's retained life estate, and where if your future in a piece of property and upon your death, it goes to the charitable organization. I don't want to spend too much time on these, but I just wanted you all to be aware that there are so many things out there. When you look at the totality of the assets that you have and the impact that you want to have on the organizations that you have high affinity for and you care for, there's so much opportunity out there to make gifts. So with that, I want to go to the chat here. We have a little bit of a call to action. This was the last time we shared the same call to action. Dr. Gaudiani, I've seen her speak a couple of times. She's got some really cool books. She's a professor at Yale. I think she's retired now, but I think The Greater Good is the one this quote comes from. But I think, this is our moment in time. Last time we looked at some of the statistics about women coming into wealth in our country and the impact that we're having with that wealth and what that looks like. And I think, the more we can kind of have these conversations, stop and spend some time thinking about it. Wow, look at what we could accomplish together, as Mandy was talking about.
Mhm.
So I hope that you guys will kind of share some of those thoughts with us as we continue through this campaign, and understanding where that might align with the goals of One Destiny.
Yeah,
Mandy, any thoughts there before we get into resources?
Yeah, I really want you all to feel connected to your personal power, and the legacy that you want to create, with your priorities in philanthropy. And that might not be the Find Me Foundation, and that's okay. But we are excited at the fact that as FIMU women, that we are taught throughout our tenure, in membership, to be philanthropists, and owning the fact that that is really who we are, whether that is with our wisdom, our wealth, or our work. We all have been, programmed during our tenure as FIMU women, to really serve in that capacity, and to really enhance others and enable others with that wealth, wisdom, and work. And so if you do have questions, I know obviously I'm biased and very passionate about our work with the FIMU Foundation and One Destiny, but I also am super happy to speak with you about your priorities and to even work with you through this worksheet that we've created, because we want you to remove those myths and those barriers so that you can feel connected to that philanthropic work, that you all are doing, that you might not even realize you're doing it, like we talked about earlier with Liz and Katrina. There's so many of you who are contributors around the table for the One Destiny campaign, and I look forward to celebrating you in this effort. So thank you. And then obviously we wanted to give you these resources. These books are certainly things that I think can empower you. I know that they are feel good, educational pieces for you. And let us know if you have any questions. I had not read Women, Wealth, and Giving, and I actually purchased it in preparation for this effort. So I was super excited to get my copy and get to reading on that. It has just so many great resources to feel empowered with what we do as women.
Yeah, Mandy, I put this slide, I put the picture in because you can get it for $6 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's expensive to buy it new, but
yes.
It is a lot of the stuff that I was talking about earlier really comes from this book. And this is really, it really does make you kind of, like I said early on, when someone asked me to talk about women in philanthropy, I was kind of like, yeah, women in philanthropy. I was like, no, it's actually there's a lot of scholarship on it, and really interesting, thought-provoking, how our gender informs how we think about these things. And I really appreciate some of the work and some of the prompts in this Women, Wealth, and Giving that we try to provide with you tonight on the slide deck and then in your worksheet.
Yeah.
The women's
I was going to say,
go ahead.
And for those of you who are not aware, the Women's Philanthropy Institute is at the University of Indiana, or IUPUI. And, it has really inspired a lot of universities to focus. Now, we are such a unique organization, and Kelly, you can kind of speak to this because of the breadth of knowledge that you have with your consulting. But, we are unique in the fact that we are a women's organization. So this is who we are. So it's not that we even have to empower or create programming that is specific for women. A lot of universities have embraced the Institute's philosophies. I know that some of the universities that I have worked for in the past have created their own women in philanthropy committees and groups to empower women and have them feel feel connected to the university. So I encourage you all to look into your university to see if this is something that you can get involved in. It's a really wonderful way to feel connected to other women and to embrace your philanthropic power. Kelly, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add. I apologize. I spoke over you.
No, that's great. No, there's a live link here. When you share the slide deck to that website, but you can just Google this. It's IUPUI. But there's a lot of, if you want to look at some of the research, they do a research project every year related to women's philanthropy, and they've done it for over a decade now, maybe even longer. And there's really some, if you're interested on that side of the equation, that's the science. They've got a lot of good of the science part of it. And then the Giving While Doing Good is a really interesting kind of resource book. It's maybe more like an anthology of sorts, but it has really interesting historical, kind of the Prometheus kind of approach, kind of like what is like philosophically been our like history's approach to philanthropy and giving and charity. And if you're looking to kind of get a prompt of what is my philosophy or kind of how do I approach it, I think that Giving While Doing Good can give you some inspiration in that regard. You can also find that one on Amazon. What can you not find on Amazon?
You obviously, the website would be able to be telling on the Women's Philanthropy Institute, but I believe that it was established like 2005. So, I mean, it's been a great history of really supporting women in philanthropy and that research.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up tonight, it is 2022, isn't it, Mandy? Goodness gracious.
I know. It's hard to believe. Especially these past weeks have been blur for me, that's for sure.
2005, didn't see that long ago. Okay, so continuing the conversation, just would like to hear, especially, we wanted this to be a little bit workshop, but, anything that jumped out to you, notes that you took, things that intrigued you, questions, we'd love to hear, jump on or give us a drop in the chat. We want to hear a little bit about your thoughts on our topic today.
Yeah.
I just want to say this is one of the most uplifting and feel-good webinars that I've been on in a long time. So I actually appreciate it. I did join late, so I didn't get the worksheet. I hope you can send that out. But,
yes, I will.
But I do appreciate it.
I thank you, Liz. Thank you. That really means a lot. And I will send you that. And I'm going to send the slides out to this group as well so that you can get them. That's why I wanted to make sure I had everybody in the chat that was attending so I could get that out to you. But yeah, thank you. We really, when Kelly and Kristen and I sat down about this effort for this webinar series, we really did want to show you all how you have the power to make change. And, like Kelly said, that's like one of my favorite slides of this deck was the financial capital, the social capital, the courage capital, and the change capital. And I don't think as women, we often think of ourselves with that power of those four pieces. And so I agree. So thanks, Liz.
Yeah. And also, though, you mentioned the planned gifts and everything, and I loved working with you, Mandy, on mine. I don't have a ton of money. I don't. I live paycheck to paycheck, but I do have a retirement account set up. I have life insurance and everything. So that's what I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I have a kid next to me who has fur. She can't take care of me when I'm older. So I want to leave it all to foundation. It's a very important cause to me. But I hope you don't mind, Mandy, my talking about,
Please.
You and I have been kind of thinking for a little bit of while about the specifics, but in case anybody has some bright ideas that I'm not coming up with, one thing I would like to do with that planned gift is to help foundations to support our sisters who are or will be by that time elder orphans. People who are childless and without family to care for them. I'm going to be one. It's a really scary prospect, but we have a lot of sisters, even sisters who are involved nationally as officers and volunteers. We have several at my alumni chapter here in Pittsburgh, and I worry for us. Some of us will be in great shape, others will not. And I know that we need to look out for each other as sisters. So that's what I would like to do. And if you have any brilliant ideas about how to make that happen, please share them with me or Mandy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we are, I mean, truly some of the ideas that Liz has had with our planning is really thoughtful and really brave, Liz. And I know that we talked about that, but it really is just a brave declaration on what will happen and how can we ensure that we are supporting each other as we get older. And so I am with you, and I look forward to us making sure that we make a plan.
I like Rose's comment. She said it's like the new TV commercial about the young lady who could not get attention for the salesperson because of being female. And she pulled out her male doll and spoke in a little post to get noticed. Yeah, right. It's the power of the purse. Like what? Yeah. How can we, change that dynamic?
Right.
Yeah. And I guess too, it's like, what voice are we speaking with when we're talking about what our legacy and seeing ourselves that way? Yeah.
That's right, Kelly. So we talked a little bit about what intrigues us and what worries us.
Yeah.
I hope that this leaves you inspired, and that if there are concepts that jumped out to you and that you'd like to talk about it, Angel's on the call, Amy's on the call, Kristen's on the call, and we are, first and foremost, we are your sisters. But we also want to help you feel empowered. So please let us know. We will be in touch with the worksheet again, and the, yeah, that's right, Vicki. That's right, Pam Wadsworth and her brilliant idea of creating a senior living for all 5Us. And I know that Pam would have it in Austin, Texas. I don't know if you're amenable to Austin, Texas, Liz.
I mean, we could always have a Pittsburgh branch for people who like winter. I mean, I don't know. I thought about the same thing.
I think there's something to that. There's a business opportunity
There
there,
really
I think,
is.
Ladies. So thank you, all of you, Cindy, Donna, Rose, Vicki. I see Sharon on here. Carolyn, I didn't get to see you. I just saw you, Carolyn. Nice to see you. And Lisa Lang, nice to see you. Robin, thank you, everybody. And Melissa and Katrina. We are so grateful for you all to have been on this journey with us. We have one more part of this series to go, and it's talking more about your 5U legacy. So we'll hope that you'll join us on March 15th. It's a Tuesday, same time, 8 p.m. And you can use this link. This is the same link that will be distributed, but I will send it out again, along with some great opportunities for us to get together in March. So thank you so much. We are so grateful as a staff, but even more so to be your sisters. And thank you, Kelly, for leading us. We just love having you as our partner, and we are very grateful. So thank you, everybody, and we will be in touch.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks. This was really good. I had a question that may not be a quick question, and so that's fine.
Go for it.
Just what should we look for in organizations that we want to contribute to? So what are financials? What are, are there, I know that there's various scales, the various graders, if you will, of organizations. And it may be something that's completely off topic, and I appreciate that, but it's just it feels like there should be some criteria as well.
Love this question, Cindy.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Go ahead,
Kelly.
Mandy. I'm going to drop in Charity Navigator.
I was just going to say, so there are, basic tools that you can use, like Kelly's putting in there with Charitable Navigator, and ways that you can look into the health of those organizations. But there are a lot of other ways that you can ask questions of those individual contacts. Sometimes it is really truly just that. Oh, GuideStar, that's another great resource. Sometimes that the GuideStar will give you all the 990s and the financial health of those organizations. But sometimes, quite frankly, it's simply asking your contact simple questions and how they answer with those transparency. So it's that communication with those individuals and asking, it's not often the tough questions. It's sometimes just basic questions about how the individual protects their investments, how the organization utilizes those donations. But it's not, obviously, even still with what we do as a Greek organization, it's not always apples to apples. So you have to be careful with some of these resources that we've put in the chat. They're excellent resources. They're great to navigate, but it's not always comparable, right? People, it's all about how that organization reports. And sometimes organizations report differently.
Yeah.
Kristen and Kelly, I don't know if you want to jump in. I'm sure I'm missing some parts of what I would want to say. And I don't know if that was all clear.
No, I think it's like volunteering with the organization is, a great way to learn a little bit more about that. I think, if anytime you're looking at just data as your definitive, that's not really going to give you the whole picture.
Yeah.
So always, talking to someone, that can represent the organization and walk you through, what those financials really mean and the application of those financials. So I think that's the really important thing. But Charity Navigator is a good place to start. If you get a out of the blue solicitation, you don't really know who's associated to that. But usually as you're, going through, I think it's that looking at that work, wisdom, wealth, how you really are involved in that organization just beyond giving.
Yeah, great question, Cindy.
I think
So
also
we're a Charity Navigator and GuideStar. I'm a board chair, and we are GuideStar Platinum, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
So that it's good to know that those are the main resources. So, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
I think also as somebody who often does research, looking for their annual reports and also any publications that particular organization may put out. And not just to look at the most recent ones, but also to go back a little bit and kind of try to pick up some of the history. Will tell you a lot.
And if I may even just underscore Kelly's wonderful guidance and suggestion there of having a conversation and asking an individual from that organization to walk you through, because I think the transparency is obviously important, but the 990s can be, they're very complex IRS documents. And they can be, again, it's how the organization chooses to report. So sometimes it is not, apples to apples, as Mandy said. So to me, I think that it's a wonderful call. I've had many wonderful opportunities to speak with donors, and we walk through what their questions are and be very direct with those answers to give you that guidance. It's you as a donor, as a public charity, that is all information that is afforded to you. And those organizations should be providing that directly to you when asked.
Great question, Cindy. Anybody else have any other questions that they want us to dispel or to help guide? Okay, well, we're always available even beyond this call. And I know I can say that for Amy, Angel, and Kristen and I. And again, thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you to our board members who are on this call. Former board members, Sharon is on this call. Former board members, Carolyn. We are so grateful. Thank you, Vicki and Robin. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call.
Good night.
Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.